And we also want to acknowledge, Mother's Day can be a tough day for some people. It can be a tough day because maybe you've struggled with your mom. Maybe you've got maybe you have a broken relationship with one of your kids. Maybe you've never been able to have children. Maybe you feel like as a mom, you're less than others. And today I'm excited because we're going to hear from a mom who's going to speak to us and tell us about how Jesus honored women. And the way Jesus honored women brings grace and help and mercy to everyone, but especially to women. Janet McHenry, a lot of you already know, she's a member of our board of trustees here. She's the head of our prayer ministry. You may not know, she's authored 20 books on prayer. And one of the best-selling ones was called Prayer Walking, which actually is her passion. She started a business, an organization called Looking Up. And it's part of the motto of her life, or what she wants to try to help others do, is to learn how to look up and engage with our Father in heaven and recognize that, who He is and His desire to help us. She's been featured in a couple of magazines, Health and what was the other one? I forget, Family Circle, because of the way God changed her life through prayer walking, and also because of the answers to prayer that she received as a result of that. She and her husband, Craig, have raised 4 kids out in the Sierra Valley. He's a rancher. She retired last year from teaching at public school, but is still probably busier than ever. She was contacted pretty quickly after retiring from 3 publishing companies wanting her to write some more books, and she's in the middle now of doing that. One of the books she's writing deals with the prayer life of Jesus, and I'm looking forward to that, but I'm especially looking forward to having you guys hear what she has to say. I had a chance to hear it in the first service, and I'm excited that we're going to get a chance to hear how Jesus honored women. Would you welcome Janet McHenry as she comes to speak?
Good morning. Super excited to be here today, especially on Mother's Day. As a mom, I've often felt a little less than, and it was often in that one particular season of life of the year. It wasn't summer when the kids were off from school. It wasn't in the fall when they go back. It wasn't in the winter. It was science fair season. Some of you know what this is like, science fair season. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I was reminded of that recently when I attended my grandchildren's science fair. Each of them had done a project regarding mice. And the thing basically that they learned from that science fair is, and you might find this helpful as well, is that if you eat cheese, you will get fat. That's what happened in their project. This was wonderful payback and very satisfying for me because my daughter, Rebecca, all of her science fair projects were regarding animals. The most memorable one was when she had an aquarium and she placed about a half a dozen snails or so in there. And in a matter of week, yes, snails. In a matter of week, what she learned is that snails are a lot more smart than you think they are because they multiply like crazy and then they work together. They climb up each other's, and soon the snails were climbing up out of that aquarium into the better garden of her bedroom. We got rid of those snails. Her brother, though, had probably the most memorable of the science fair projects. Joshua, he decided to see if he could help, create methane gas. So, yes, true. He got some manure from out in the ranch, and he brought it in the bedroom, and I'm not exactly sure what he did with it, but methane gas was being created in our home. It was invading every other space of the home that we had. And so then I said, it can't stay here anymore. So it went out in the garage. It was too much for the garage very shortly after that. It went to the FFA classroom at the high school. Way too much for the FFA classroom. It went out into the barn, and methane gas was all over the place. The ag teacher had to tell him, no more, Josh. And what I'm thinking is, as I walked back into his bedroom after that shortly, the smell was still there. But wait a minute, no, that wasn't methane gas. That was just the natural smell of his bedroom. The natural smell. So what I'm thinking, moms, is that if we could harness the smells of our children's bedrooms, we could solve the energy crisis of this world. Truly. But I felt less as a mom in those kinds of science fair periods of my life. I felt less as a teacher, less as a sister, as a daughter, and perhaps each of you here maybe in some way have felt a little less than. I've been hanging out with Jesus a lot lately because I've been working on this book about his prayer life, and I've gotten super excited because I've really learned that as I'm studying the Gospels, I've learned that he really loved women. Now, you might not think that was the case because all of his disciples were men, right? But there are many, many instances where he demonstrates he really loved and cared for and appreciated women. This was very unusual during New Testament times when female babies were just discarded. They were thrown away. They were abandoned. And in fact, the ratio of men to women during that time was 140 men to every 100 women. Girls received little or no education at all. And a woman's highest calling was produce a male heir. And if she couldn't, she was discarded for the next wife. Jesus was different, though. In John Ortberg's book, Who is This Man?, he said Jesus behaved in a new fashion. He was doing something very subversive. He was treating a woman like someone who had her own identity. What exactly did he do, people, that was so radical, that historically elevated the whole position in society that women had? First, Jesus valued women. He respected them. He understood that they were as important as men to the Creator. We see how in at least 4 different ways. First, and perhaps most obvious, is that he healed women as well as men. And there are several examples here. First, Peter's mother-in-law. You may know that Jesus spent most of his ministry time in the town of Capernaum. That's where Peter lived. And it's on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee. The disciples often hung out there as well. And one day, Jesus found Peter's mother-in-law in bed with a fever. We see this in Matthew 8:14-15. So with just a touch of the hand, Jesus healed her, and the woman began to wait on him. Now, we could sort of think, well, he just wanted the cooking thing to keep on going on, right? But just as he wanted his feet washed and supper on the table and such, Matthew also records in chapter 9 that he healed Jairus' dead daughter. The synagogue ruler approached Jesus. He was a synagogue ruler at Capernaum, in the town where Jesus was staying. He approached Jesus one day while he was teaching, and he said, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her, and she will live." And again, we could argue, well, that Jesus maybe only healed the girl or was thinking about it because, this was the synagogue ruler. You got to stay in good with the various authorities in the community. But then as he's on his way to Jairus' home, he gets interrupted again. A woman who had been afflicted with bleeding for 12 years touches the garment, the edge of his cloak as he's passing by. And he sees her and he says in Matthew 9:22, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you." Then right after that, a short time later, Jesus takes Jairus' daughter by the hand and raises her from death. And again, it could be argued that he only healed the bleeding woman because she was kind of on the way to Jairus' home. But then Luke tells us that Jesus also healed Mary of Magdala. We call her Mary Magdalene usually. He healed her of 7 demons. Now, there's no rationale for that. Why would he heal some crazy woman? Because he loved her. She was not as important a player. He simply loved her. Another way we know that Jesus valued women was that Jesus associated with women. Many actually traveled with him as he went throughout Galilee and beyond. Luke 8:1-3 tells us that some of these women, in addition to Mary Magdalene, were Joanna, who was the wife of Chuza, the man who managed Herod's household, and Susanna, about whom we otherwise don't know much. A third way that we know that Jesus valued women was that he taught women. First, we have the Mary and Martha story in Luke 10:38 through 42. This is the story when Jesus is in Mary and Martha and Lazarus' home, and he's teaching the disciples, and Mary comes to his feet, and she's sitting there, and she's listening as well. And where's Martha? Martha's over in the kitchen, and she's fixing, some sandwiches or something. And but then Martha comes up to Jesus, and she says, tell my sister, Jesus, to come help me. She's just sitting there doing nothing. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you worry about many things, but Mary has chosen the better part. What is he saying? Is he saying, get out of the kitchen, or you're not as good as your sister, you're less than? No, he's not saying that. You are worthy, he is saying. You are worthy of being taught as well. You come with your sister. You are worthy. Jesus also used parables to teach women. Think about this. Yeah, we have the parable of the sower, parable of the prodigal son, and so forth. Lots of parables with men in them, but we have at least 4 with women in them as well. These symbolic stories would appeal to the woman, and there were different kinds of women. First, the parable of the yeast in Matthew 13:33. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour and worked it all through the dough. But then there's also in Matthew 25 the parable of the 10 virgins. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Third, we have the parable of the lost coin in Luke 15:8 through 10. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Then we have the parable of the persistent widow in Luke 18. I love this story. It's about the woman who keeps going to the judge, asking him for a particular kind of decision about something. And her persistence wins him over. So why would Jesus have parables with women in them unless he wanted them also to learn about the kingdom of heaven? They were just as important. The women were following him. They were listening to him. They heard stories with women in them, not just men. And notice they were different kinds of women. The woman working in the home with the dough, okay? The 10 virgins, the unmarried women, the widow, and also the woman who had saved at least a day's wages. Now, either she was managing the household or she was working in some way. So she had coins. All different kinds of women. His stories appealed to them, and they could relate to these women and learn about the kingdom of God. Lastly, and Pastor Bill mentioned this on Easter Sunday, Jesus showed us that he valued women because he trusted them after the resurrection. Why was it? It was the women, in fact, who had followed him to the cross. It was the women who had wept and wailed as he was nailed to the tree. Where were the men? Granted, I think that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John may have been somewhere, right? Because they were recording the story. But otherwise, we don't see the men there. He revealed himself to the women. He could trust them with the news that he was alive indeed. He appeared first to Mary Magdalene, that woman he'd healed of the 7 demons. He appealed first to her, one of the lowliest in the community. Isn't that amazing? Gospel of Matthew also says that the other Mary was there. This gets confusing. Okay, so you have Mary, mother of Jesus, and then you have Mary Magdalene, that's 2 Marys, Mary of Magdala, and then you have this other Mary. Who is this other Mary? The other Mary actually is Mary's sister. She is the wife of Clopas, is mentioned in the word. So this reminds me of the Bob Newhart show. Do you remember that skit? Hi, I'm Larry, and this is my brother Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl. Do you remember that? I'm imagining that family reunions were a little confusing. Hi, this is my Aunt Mary, and this is my other Aunt Mary. Could be confusing. But women were there after the resurrection. There were others as well. Joanna and Salome, she was the mother of James and John. So what are we going to take from this? What would Jesus do today? What could we do today to demonstrate our appreciation for the women in our lives? How about just saying some kind words to someone that you care about? Your wife, your mother, your sister, your Aunt Mary, okay? Your grandmother, a coworker, a friend. My brother this morning, I was delighted. I rarely hear from him. He lives in Missouri. But he texted me this morning, Happy Mother's Day. I love you. That's all I needed to hear from my brother. So the second way we see that Jesus honors women is that he seems to understand them. He understood women. He knows that women's basic, inherent, inborn need is to be loved, to be accepted, and to be affirmed. He loved them in such a way that he put his life on the line for them. Yes, he went to the cross for all of us, but he demonstrated his love and care for women by even risking his reputation for them. And we can see this in at least two examples. First, he affirmed their need for love and acceptance. You know that the longest conversation in Scripture that we have recorded is with a Samaritan woman. This takes place in John 4. The Jews held that the Samaritans were unclean, and so conversing with them as a Jew was a no-no. But what does he do? He actually takes a drink from her receptacle. And that would be a double no-no during that time. The woman had not only been married 5 times, she was also not married to her current partner. But he sees not a Samaritan woman, not a loser, not a reject, but a woman who needed to know that she was loved and accepted. This is so cool. This is also the one time that we have when he reveals that he is, in fact, for the first time, the Messiah. He says, I who speak to you am he. He tells this to the woman there. She's also becomes one of the first, or if not the first, Christian missionary, because she goes back to Sychar, which is her city, and she tells everybody in the whole town about Jesus, this man who had spoken to her. He had affirmed her. He had loved her. He said he was the Messiah to her, a Samaritan woman. And the whole town believes. Jesus also affirms the compassionate nature of women. We see intuitively pain in others. We know how to help. We know when to hug. We know when to say the right word, and he affirms that. On 2 occasions in Scripture, women anoint him with precious, expensive perfume. And even when the men in the room are not happy about that waste, he affirms them. The first story takes place in the home of a Pharisee, Simon. He's also known as Simon the leper. A sinful woman, a prostitute, anoints Jesus' head with perfume and wipes his feet clean with her tears, using her own hair to clean them, and then pours the rest all over them. Simon the Pharisee says, "What?" And it's the disciples are also ticked about the waste. Jesus comes to the woman's defense, though, and he says, "Why are you bothering this woman? You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. She has done a beautiful thing to me. What she has done will be told in memory of her." And in fact, now when we think of the people who loved Jesus the most, where do we go? The women, the 2 women who anointed him with their tears and their perfume. The other instance is when we see Mary of Bethany. Number 4 Mary now, right? Mother Mary, Sister Mary, Mary Magdalene, and now Mary of Bethany. She's Martha and Lazarus' sister. So he's there, as he is often. Bethany is only a couple miles from Jerusalem to the east. And he's there teaching, and she pours a pint of expensive perfume on his feet and wipes them with her hair. A pint. Now, let me kind of give you an idea. This is the only perfume I own. It's 2 ounces. Imagine 8 times this amount. Okay, that's a lot. And Jesus is delighted with that. He allows it. He allows her to minister to him in that way. But Judas objects. Judas, who right after this incident, by the way, betrays Jesus. And what does Jesus say to him? Leave her alone. He appreciated the loving, giving nature of Mary, who would sit at his feet. So what are we going to take from this? We can learn from Jesus again. How could we affirm someone today? Is there a woman in your life who needs to know that she is loved? Imagine that today I will hear from all 4 of my children. Rebecca makes sure of that every year. She texts the others and reminds them it's Mother's Day. She's already given me a beautiful gift, a cute little birdhouse that I just love. I will hear from Bethany. She's 3 hours behind. She just got up in Honolulu. So, but the boys, I may hear from them eventually as well. But really, all we need is, we just need an I love you, right? We just need an I love you. Third, what we see Jesus doing is he protected women. He understood the vulnerability of women in such a culture that would abandon a baby girl or send a married woman out on the streets if she didn't, if the husband didn't like her cooking very much. First, he defended women. We see this with the story of the woman caught in adultery in John 8. He challenged the accusers by saying, if any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. When all the men walked away, he said, woman, and I'm going to clarify this, woman. It's not like, woman, would you get me another beer? It's like, woman, precious one.